Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media on the various platforms, wherever you are, we welcome you to the show. And it is Wednesday nights with myself, Inayat Wadi, where once again we host panel discussions on topical issues. And one of the big talking points in South Africa still remains the whole question surrounding migrants, illegal immigration, and there are just so many perspectives that one can actually look at it from different angles. And I think one of the most critical question is what are some of the solutions? Because we know that at this point in time, there's just so much that is happening, and particularly looking at how businesses, people across the board are affected. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I received quite an interesting piece that was written by the Movement for the United South Africa, MUSA as it's known, MUSA, and talking about immigration, talking about community tensions, human dignity, and the way forward. And this is the reason why we've assembled the panel mainly made up from MUSA, and we are joined this evening by Abu Karolia, who is a founder member of the Movement of United South Africa, Karuna Mohan, who is an activist, Ikbal Kolia, transformative consciousness advocate, and also Yusuf Ebrahim Patel, who is a transformative consciousness advocate. As we await my guests on screen, I see Abu is on screen already, Yusuf joining us as well, and Iqbal's coming through right now. To all three of you, Abu, Yusuf, and Iqbal, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome and jazakallah khairan so much for your time.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yes,
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Inayat, and to your listeners as well.
yes.
And thank you for
I'm
having us
hoping
on the show.
Karuna Mohan can actually join us. I know she was having problems with sound, but I think let's continue, Iqbal, in the interest of time. Now, Iqbal, 2 or 3 weeks ago, you sent me this piece that MUSA had actually put out, and it actually just covers so much, but also taking a look at it from a very different angle, a different perspective. We all have been talking about the problems of migration, about March in March, about what is happening, the intimidation, the treatment of foreigners as well. But what we want to look at tonight is look at a solutions-based discussion, which this document actually speaks to. So, Iqbal, if you could just maybe, just lay the foundation for tonight's discussion, and just to provide a bit of background, looking at it from a MUSA perspective, and why this document and why this submission is so necessary.
Thank you very much for that, Inayat. So, following that little piece that I sent to you and the suggestion of having a show on the matter, I then spoke to my colleagues in MUSA, and here we are. We've got them on your panel. And Yusuf will kick off with the background to the MUSA statement position on the issue. And Abu can come in thereafter to clarify issues, and I intend to deal with answering your question thereafter so that we have a proper perspective on where I'm coming from as well.
Okay, all right, but Jazakallah, shukran for that, Yusuf.
Assalamu alaikum again, and thanks for having us. And I think this is a really critical matter, the issue of international migration, and what we often, there's international migration and then there's undocumented migrants, and I think we always need to just distinguish there as well. I think just to paint a bit of a picture, the problem we're facing, from an African continental context perspective, migration is a challenge. There's various push factors in terms of, poverty. Africa has got a very youthful population, and people are seeking economic opportunities. Climate change is a big factor. So in many countries, there's droughts, but also, food security is a big problem. Governance weaknesses, and then you have conflict also taking place on the continent. So there's a lot of these push factors for migration, which, in our statement, the MUSA statement that we issued on 16th June, we try to put this in context. We understand the matter fully. Now, there's 304 million international migrants globally. Out of that, uh, 21 to 22 million, so 7% of the international migrants are from the African continent. And a lot of migration that's taking place out of African countries, a lot of it largely is within the continent. People are moving within the continent, but a lot of people are moving to Europe, Middle East, as well as North America, right? And in South Africa, we have about 2.4 to 3 million migrants in South Africa. That's according to official statistics. The actual number of undocumented migrants, we don't have those actual figures. So that hasn't been actually counted, and I think that's an important point. But the broader issue is that international migration is a global phenomenon. It is impacting on us in South Africa. And our broad approach, we're saying, is that we need to address the situation from the perspective of our constitution and our constitutional values. And what we emphasize in our constitution is human dignity, equality, socioeconomic justice, doing things for the common good, but also we have global responsibilities, and in terms of managing the climate and the global common good. I think those are the kind of values we have, and out of that we have values like Ubuntu, recognizing our humanity in each other. So for us, that is a very important framing perspective, and that is also where the movement for United South Africa, emanates from, in terms of enhancing, advocating for our constitutional values, but also focusing on this transformative consciousness, which is about recognizing and being aware and, ensure that we have activism towards building our country, but towards also, ethical leadership and towards building prosperity for everyone, and having this and ensuring that we have transformative programs that address and deal with our situation. So I think we must recognize this, and the fact that we do have a challenge in South Africa with our high levels of unemployment, poverty, inequality in our own country. Many of our own citizens are actually struggling in survival mode. Cost of living is high and increasing. And in that context, there are challenges in terms of resources and job opportunities, and people are trying to earn incomes. So I think the migration issue in our country has landed, within that socioeconomic dynamic, and it is a real challenge and a problem. But we believe that the way to deal with that problem is not to, turn against our fellow human beings and our fellow compatriots on the continent, and recognizing that, we issued a statement on June the 16th. We remember where we've come from as a country, the struggles we had, and the solidarity that we had on the continent as well. So we emphasizing that we got to, maintain and keep that. And the issue that we're facing in terms of our own challenges, we need to recognize that people do have real challenges. Our own citizens are facing daily challenges, but the way to deal with it is not to turn, and turn our anger and frustration onto migrants. It's not. Migrants do face a challenge on our economy in terms of, on our resources and services, etc. But there isn't any evidence to say that is the fundamental driver that is causing a lot of our own problems and challenges of poverty and inequality. I think we have a lot of fundamental problems in our own system, structural economic challenges and problems, which we need to overcome. We need better governance in our own country. And a lot of that will actually assist to overcome all our challenges. We also understand that we faced in a global context of increasing technology changes, We have AI coming on board, the digital economy. Job creation is a very serious challenge. Many countries are facing that challenge. We've got a particular angle to that challenge because of our history. So we have serious structural weaknesses. But what we really need as a country is to pull ourselves together and really find ways and transformative ways and innovative ways of how we can actually create work, create jobs, get people better skilled, create trades, but also local businesses within our country. How we also can create the right climate so that we are employing people in the right ways, we following regulations, and we improving the conditions ourselves. So I think it's a challenge for government, business, civil society, households. We all have to look at this challenge from that perspective. And from MUSA, we're saying let's not turn this into a situation where we're not recognizing what the real root causes of the problem are. Thank you.
Yes, Yusuf. In fact, I think what you are saying is important, and I think there's just so much you said which raises further questions and further points of discussion. But just to bring Abu into the discussion, and I think Abu Ikbal actually summed it up quite well when he sent me a brief on what we want to talk about, and saying that this is not about defending illegal immigration or intimidation or violence or anything of that sort. But the key and the most critical issue is this is easily now becoming a broader crisis in the making. And it is up to us, and it is up to organizations like MUSA and many other organizations to actually step up and to highlight this fact that before things get out of hand, before people start losing their humanity. And I think this is absolutely critical, and this is where some of the red flags and the dangers actually lie.
I think, Inayat, that you're asking me to come in, I just want to clarify about the notion of transformative consciousness as a movement. You see, first and foremost, MUSA believes in the moral, ethical values of leaders that will serve our country, support our people on a socio-economic and political justice point of view. And then they have to be uplifted so that they can deal with the integrity of who they are. And as Yusuf has rightly pointed out, that sometimes we have to be careful that we have the migrant issue, but the real issues on hand are not actually being tackled. So now you have a migrant issue. And it's not as if the migrant issue is not an issue. You have to understand in how the migrant issue will be dealt with within the context of what MUSA would offer. And this is something very, very important, in which I will deal with as we go. As we know, I've written an article somewhat in March or April sometime that we should not scapegoat the idea of migrants. While there is a migrant issue, you shouldn't scapegoat migrants to say that there is a wider problem of state failure and governance, as we know what's going on in our country. I mean, we have got a huge situation of unemployment. We've got corruption. We've got a whole range of ideas of non-delivery and service delivery. So the emotions of maybe the March and March movement has kind of asked our people to come onto a March status of the migrants. But the actual issue is just not the migrants. While the migrants is an issue, as I said, I'll come to it now. The bigger issue is that they should take the issue to government and ask them how they're going to deal with the real issues that's confronting the people. So when people become disillusioned, they kind of use some people in the community. In this case, Jacinta formed the organization in 2025, okay, March and March. And then what is now being dealt with an organization like this, it is basically becoming a mass organization. But a mass organization as such, so we don't want to see chaos in our country. We don't want to see a situation in the way people march. And what are then the rights of the migrants as such? And this is very, very, very crucial to understand how we're dealing with this. You have to remember something, Inayat, that our constitution actually has got an immigration act. Within the idea of immigration act, we have to decide what is the notion of the Immigration Act and how immigrants are actually protected in this country. At the same time, we also have to deal with border management. It's not as if MUSA is advocating a porous border. We're not doing that at all. What we are looking is how can we deal with this in a humane way, which is centered so that we can find a proper solution in terms of how we deal with open border platform. What is the position of who migrants and who we all are rooted in constitutionalism. Then we have to deal with ethical leadership, accountable governance, and shared responsibility, which I think a broader conversation is required there. So in that sense of the word, MUSA will actually talk about a border control must remain constitutional. One, MUSA's commitment to human dignity means that enforcement cannot become brutality. Okay? That means no xenophobic violence, no collective punishment. These are crucial to the way that MUSA is actually looking at how we have to look at things in a humane manner. Now, if you see the kind of way that sometimes marches get out of control and what actually happens to intimidation, and this is not only including the migrants, this could be including minority communities. It could be including businesses that are registered. It could even be including established people that are living in this country for 375 years from the time of the people, say the European people came here. Then the British came here. And then we've also got a history to what is a migrant situation. We have apartheid in the picture. I mean, in the 40, 50 years of what apartheid did in terms of the mining capacity, they brought in migrants from Maputo and other places. And these people have made their families here. So we have to distinguish what is workers, what is migrants, and then also what is the idea of those people are refugees. So we have to understand those different dynamics of what this means. What is interesting, Inayat, that recently there was a SADC conference, okay? And I think things really boiled over and there was a tension that they couldn't even talk about African affairs properly. But one thing, South Africa brought onto the table the migrant issue. And you know what, while arguing to the point to tell them that you guys in your country, now I'm coming to a perspective of debate and discussion, that you fellows, you leaders of the country, while we are from the AU or we're from SADC, and we now have to see what migrant mean for us. While they debated and then they realized when they ended that we're going to have to table migrant as an agenda for Africa. Because it's not only a South African issue. It is the fact that if I am not able to get a job in Zimbabwe, and then I look at pastures, which are not for South Africa. So we know that many people helped us in apartheid years, okay? I'm now going to the point of giving a more focused view of what Yusuf was said. And then comes to the point where our president, former Mandela, who was humanitarian in every way, and he was recognizing the position of Africa. So he allowed the fact that we must respect all African people. You know, the concept of Ubuntu is not a black concept. It's an African philosophy. It's an African philosophy how we share our values as African people. Now, when that happens, he asked our people to respect African people, and then the borders were somewhat porous. And maybe in that sense of the word, there was a difficulty in the fact that we did not actually have a proper police in place or SEPs in place and how we were managing our borders. So how that happened, it just went out of hand. I mean, you know what? People came to our country in a way of bribery, corruption, some legally, some not legally, some documented, some not documented. Now we have the issue on hand, and we have to now solve this issue in the way that MUSA will have to suggest, and the following discussion must take place of the various categories and how we table this and bring forward with all the parties. And as citizens and as civil society, we cannot keep quiet about this because it's not only the migrant issue. We're going to have to say migrant issue. Then we're going to have to think about how we're dealing with the state capture that took place, the mismanagement of government, and what we would like to see as all citizens in this country, including a proper border management and the condition and coherent view of how Home Affairs will operate. I'll leave it until there, until I have some years to years from Ikbal, and then we can continue our discussion further.
Yes,
Thank you.
Abu, Jazakallah for that. Ikbal, I'd just like you to comment on what both Yusuf and Abu have said, because I think what is important is we see that the finger is being pointed mainly at the government. And I think just looking at South Africans, we've got legitimate grievances, and we cannot hide away, we cannot shy away from that fact that there are legitimate grievances in this country. But again, it is about the law, it is about applying the law, it is about enforcing the law. And this is important, enforcing the law in an orderly way, in a humane way as well. And also at the same time, looking at the state, how much control or how much in control is the government of the situation right now. And I think this is the point that you raised with me when we discuss the matter is, the state obviously must take control, but also at the same time to make absolutely sure that its citizens are protected. If you could unmute your mic, please, Ikbal.
Us an overview of the international situation on migration and the issues related to it. Abu has given feedback on a perspective of the issue and problems. What I've done, when I sent it to you, in my serious concern for the way things were developing on this issue, I analyzed the situation, and from my perspective, I've come up with proposal and says everybody seems to focus on what the problem is, and nobody is dealing adequately on what the solutions ought to be. And I think this is what has stirred your interest, if I'm correct. So let me start by saying South Africa must enforce its laws firmly, but it must do so without losing its humanity. Where are we now? The issue is no longer simply about undocumented immigration. It has become a broader crisis involving border and immigration management, corruption and administrative failures, unemployment and economic insecurity, community safety, fear among both South Africans and foreign nationals, and the danger of communities taking the law into their own hands. On that score, there's a video that's just doing the rounds of trouble that has emanated in Cape Town, where there's now a fight between what looks like foreign nationals and the whole migrant issue. So what we're warning about is the fire has already started in my perspective. So government has now taken steps to increase immigration enforcement, including its 5-point migration plan, increase deportations and the use of dedicated immigration courts. So the thought that arises there is, if Yusuf is talking of 30 million, these are statistics that are confirmed internationally. If 20% of that, which is 60 million, that are in South Africa, how much is 68,000 that we've dealt with so far, and how big is the problem that needs to be dealt with? So my proposals are going to address this in an orderly way, right? Can enforcement now be carried out in a manner that is lawful, orderly, humane, and economically responsible? The state must enforce the law, not the communities. The communities must leave it to the state. There are legitimate grievances among South Africans regarding illegal immigration, crime, employment, and pressure on services. But legitimate grievances cannot justify intimidation, assault, extortion, unlawful evictions, destruction of property, or private citizens conducting their own immigration enforcement. The state must take back control, but it must remain the state. The recent warning by government against unlawful identity checks, intimidation, and extortion by people pretending to act as authorities is important. A citizen cannot become Home Affairs, SAPS, and the courts all rolled into one. Foreigners, the term foreigners, are not one category. We should distinguish between documented migrants, undocumented migrants, asylum seekers and refugees, people with pending applications, people whose permits have expired, people who may have entered legally but subsequently lost status, people affected by administrative failure or corruption, people willing to leave voluntarily, and people who have committed crimes. These situations require different responses. Criminality must be dealt with as criminality. Immigration status must be dealt with through immigration law. Administrative failures must be investigated. The humanitarian dimension: some foreign nationals are now living in genuine fear. Some have lived in South Africa for many years, established families and businesses. And by the way, they were encouraged to come into the country with the early outlook of ANC policies of one Africa for all. And so people came, people saw the opportunities here, and now we're turning on them for different reasons. And have children. These people have children attending South African schools or religious institutions for many, many years. This does not give anyone an automatic right to remain unlawfully. But it does mean that government needs an orderly and humane process where people have no lawful basis to remain and wish to leave. Government should make safe and dignified voluntary departure as straightforward as possible. Where people qualify to remain, the process of regularization should be efficient and corruption-free. We cannot ignore corruption. Illegal immigration is not simply a story about people crossing borders. It can also involve corrupt officials, bribery, fraudulent documents, employers knowingly circumventing the law, and failures in government administration. The question must therefore also be who enabled the system to become dysfunctional and who benefited from it. We cannot simply deal with the person at the bottom of the system while ignoring those who profit from the system. This is where the business and economic consequences, right? My experience spans many decades in business, finance, property, labor, administration, and advisory work. Businesses do not operate in neat categories of South African and foreign. A business employing foreign nationals may also employ South Africans, rent South African premises, buy from South African suppliers, and serve South African customers. Many small businesses in poorer communities also provide basic necessities and sometimes informal credit to customers. If enforcement results in businesses closing overnight, we need to ask, what happens to the employees, customers, landlords, suppliers, and surrounding community? This does not mean avoiding enforcement. It means implementing enforcement intelligently. Give businesses a reasonable transition. Where businesses are affected by new immigration or employment requirements, government should consider a reasonable transition period to allow businesses to regularize where legally possible, reorganize their workforce, recruit and train South Africans, comply with employment requirements, dispose of substantial stock, settle obligations, or wind down in an orderly manner. The objective should be compliance without unnecessary economic destruction. Do not allow poor South Africans to become collateral damage. The closure of large numbers of small foreign-owned shops can also affect poor South Africans who depend on them for nearby access to bread, milk, basic groceries, household necessities, extended trading hours, and sometimes informal credit. Government therefore needs to consider the secondary consequences of enforcement. A practical 5-part response, I would summarize the solution as protect everyone from violence, intimidation, extortion, and unlawful eviction. Establish each person's actual immigration status through proper government processes. Where legally possible, help people obtain lawful status. Where people have no lawful basis to remain, facilitate safe and dignified departure, particularly for those willing to leave voluntarily. Fix the systems that allowed the problem to develop: border management, home affairs administration, corruption, labor enforcement, and local governance. A possible controlled administrative window. MUSA has suggested considering a 6 to 12-month controlled administrative window during which undocumented people could come forward to establish their status, regularize where legally possible, or arrange departure. Right now, they are afraid to go to Home Affairs because they would get deported immediately. They're afraid to go to the police because they're afraid they'll get locked up overnight for being here over legally. In the meantime, there are other South Africans who are capitalizing on the March movement's claims of orderly marching and what have you. They are intimidating people. We have a case in Pretoria where Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, it is claimed, went to court, but the court threw out his case. So there are numerous problems that we can touch on, but these are solutions that we are talking about. This should not be an amnesty for criminality or a reward for breaking the law. It would instead bring people out of hiding and into a controlled government process. That could actually make immigration enforcement more effective rather than less. And I believe it could speed up the process of regularization because government, I don't think, has adequate statistics on the real problem in South Africa. I don't believe anything has been done to determine that adequately. Then the role of civil society. Government should work with organizations already providing food, shelter, humanitarian assistance, transport, and counseling, legal assistance, and voluntary repatriation support. This is an area where Ubuntu can become practical rather than merely rhetorical. The message to South Africans who are entitled to ask, why have our borders not been properly managed? Why have people been allowed to remain undocumented for so many years? Why are corrupt officials not being dealt with? Why are citizens struggling to find employment? These are legitimate questions, but the answer must be, therefore, it must not be, therefore, we can attack foreigners. The answer must be, therefore, government must govern properly. The message to foreign nationals, they have a responsibility to be here lawfully, and they should be protected. Those who are here lawfully should be protected. Those who are here unlawfully must respect South Africa's immigration laws. Those who commit crimes must face the criminal justice system. Those who have no legal basis to remain should cooperate with lawful processes to regularize their status or leave. Human dignity does not mean exemption from the law. The broader MUSA message, the danger is that this issue becomes permanently framed as South Africans versus foreigners, or now within South Africa, Indian traders or other traders against the black workers. This is a dangerous, dangerous precedent in my view. We should rather frame it as law-abiding people versus lawlessness. Good governance versus... Sorry, thanks. I can stop there.
I just want to bring Yusuf back into the discussion. Now, Yusuf, I think, obviously Ikbal has articulated so much with regard to the problems, but also in terms of looking at solutions. And clearly, with the multitude of problems that we are faced with in South Africa, one cannot adopt a one-size-fits-all solution to the problem. You mentioned right at the outset that this is an international problem, and we've seen the reactions. We've seen what had happened in the United States of America going against the migrant communities, ICE, and the violence that was associated with it. We see what is playing out in Pakistan right now with Afghan refugees and how they are being managed. So what I'm saying is there's still so much taking place right across the entire world in reacting to migration. And this is the danger for us in South Africa as well, and particularly looking at it as a test to South Africa in terms of how well we manage this crisis, and more importantly, in the interest of the country, in the interest of of the unity of this country, which we fought for so very hard, and and obviously since we've become a democracy.
Yeah, absolutely, Inayat. This is a global challenge, right? And it's about the value systems that we want to adopt. We see what is happening globally. There's a whole right wing drive, anti-immigration uh, drive, but it's also, it's driven by a value system that is opposite to the value system that we have adopted as South Africans. We want to build a more humane and cooperative world. We see what is happening internationally. There are people that want to drive conflict for the sake of power, greed, and they are creating havoc in the world. In fact, a lot of Africa's problems and challenges is because of all the instability that is being created by foreign forces in different countries, right? And these then result in destabilization, and all of that creates vulnerability within the population, and then people are forced to go and find work elsewhere and to survive. So we need to look at the bigger picture around what is happening here, and we want to adopt I think we want to adopt a system, and we want to and building a better world starts with us here locally, ensuring that the grounding and the platform that we have is the kind of values that we want to maintain for ourselves and we want to take internationally. But we need to make the point that within the continent, this challenge, all African countries, we need better leadership, we need better governance, and we need transformative solutions to our economies. We have to transform our economies. We have to make them more inclusive. We have to ensure that we have sovereignty in our countries. We have to ensure that there isn't this extraction of wealth taking place across the continent and even here in South Africa, extraction by elites. And all of this is causing destabilization. The result is we're getting vulnerable people, we're putting vulnerable people against each other. And yet the bigger issue is, across the broader system. So we need ways in which we're going to actually really focus on, creating the environments for investment, ensuring that we're looking after our resources properly, that we're distributing wealth properly, that we're creating opportunities, and we're bringing young people into the picture. The biggest challenge we're facing as a continent is we've got one of the highest youthful populations in the world. And if we're going to waste this opportunity and not responsibly create economic environments, we're going to lose this dividend of this youthful population and create, a kind of negative, toxic scenario. So I think those are some of the challenges and the bigger issues that we need to be facing. So here in South Africa, we need to look at, we've got local government, elections, for example. What are we doing in our local areas? We're still talking about basic service delivery. Those should be the basic things that should be in place. Those are the basic functions municipalities, local government should be performing. What we need to be actually moving towards is how we creating local economies, how we creating jobs locally, how we confronting technology and changes in technology. There's global competition taking place. We need to be building our people's skills, and for that purpose, upgrading our skills across the continent. And those are the real issues that we need to be really addressing, that will overcome many of our challenges. Thanks.
Yes, Yusuf. And also, Abu, I was just reading the MUSA statement, and the MUSA statement talks about dialogue and opening dialogue. And I think this is absolutely important because it appears as if we are not talking enough. And I just like to quote what's written in the statement where it says, open dialogue between government, community leaders, civil society organizations, religious institutions, and migrant representatives. And this I don't see happening. We know that there have been pockets of dialogue and communication on an individual basis, on a one-on-one basis. But I think this requires a combined and a joint effort. And that dialogue is absolutely critical and crucial.
But you see, Inaya, just to come in on that point, remember we must go back to our constitution. We have got a participatory governance model in this country. So dialogue should be part of the ongoing governance systems. Remember, in the way government produces policies and plans and development and service delivery programs, communities, civil society, business have to be part of the processes in relation to coming up with those plans, buying into them, and making sure we have full involvement and participation, but also skilling our people in terms of participating in our program. So we mustn't make dialogues an ad hoc thing, related here. We must build it into our constitutional governance program. So, for example, in the local level, your municipalities have to produce integrated development plans. When those plans are being produced and when they're implemented, the forums that need to be in place, they need to be local forums. So all these issues that we deal with at a national level can be dealt with at provincial level and at local level. So dialogues are part of the process of doing integrated planning, integrated budgeting, and implementation. And government has also set up processes like the district development model, right? This is to ensure that intergovernmentally we are coordinating things, but also between government, business, civil society, we ensuring that our district, metropolitan, local spaces are being planned inclusively in an integrated way. All the challenges that we're having, we're building social compacts and visions for how we can develop. So I think we must make sure that these things get mainstreamed within our participatory democracy. We take it more seriously, we invest in it, and we ensure that there's governance, there's accountability, and there's proper management of our resources. And that the focus must be on investment and building our economy so that we continue increasing our tax base. And through that increase in the tax base, we continue to redistribute through our social programs. And we must create that virtuous cycle, in which that happens.
Yes, Yusuf. But also, I'd just like Abu to comment because, you speak about the cycle, but that cycle is not happening, Abu, at this point in time. And
Yeah.
this is the reason why, we find ourselves in a situation where it's always become somebody else's problem. Somebody else must talk on behalf of us. Yet it's a constitutional right, as you correctly pointed out, Yusuf.
You see, I just want to start off what I'm going to say is a step-by-step conversational view so that it becomes a discussion throughout the country. First and foremost, I think the leaders are not necessarily listening to the people as they should, in view of the values that we've been trying to talk to them about service delivery, etc., and government mismanagement and corruption, etc. They're not dealing with that properly. But we know we have the Madlanga Commission, etc., trying to deal with it. We saw the reality of what has been going on there. But now, I want to put a MUSA perspective for conversation. You've heard Yusuf and Ikbal in how they've showed you the kind of process we require. But I think if we have a conversation, I want to say that our conversation is rooted in our constitutionalism. Also dealing with the position of ethical leadership. Then we're looking at accountable governance, and this, in inverted commas, would be a shared responsibility. So MUSA's position on migration as such, that we have a sovereign right to control, South Africa has a sovereign right to control its borders. A country cannot be constitutional democracy without functioning borders and an immigration system that knows who enters, who leaves, with permission to remain and who does not. But you must remember there's an ethical view behind that, as what people have said, the type of migrants we have. So MUSA should therefore support effective, professional, corruption-free border management. Number two, a border control must remain constitutional. That means it must be done to human dignity. Means that enforcing cannot become brutality. No xenophobic violence, no collective punishment. So I'm giving a process in it. No arbitrary detention, no harassment based on nationality or race as such. MUSA should distinguish between categories of migrants. I think Ikbal have elaborated in terms of who will require humane treatment. Some people may be asylum seekers, refugees, workers, and all kinds of things, but it has to be orderly in a kind of way, the process that Home Affairs was determined. So then we have to realize that criminal offenders who happen to be foreign nationals, these people will have to be prosecuted. And then comes forth, MUSA should understand that we have a system of exploitation in our country, which is not only based on migrancy. So we have to have an accountable border. We have to have an accountable business person. We have to have accountable documented migrants. We have to have accountable citizens in terms of our law. And then we need an accountable government. You see, these are just the kind of varied complexities of the varied notions of how we have to look at what MUSA is suggesting. So migration cannot become a scapegoat for South Africa's failures, as we've said before. This is fundamental to MUSA's philosophy of shared responsibility in inverted commas. South Africa's unemployment, inequality, corruption, dysfunctional municipalities, housing shortage, inadequate public services cannot simply be attributed to foreigners. These are genuine migration pressures, but they are also profound domestic governance failures. MUSA should therefore reject both extremes, that migrants are responsible for everything, and migrants have no impact on South Africa. Both are intellectually dishonest. 6, MUSA should demand evidence-based migration policy, as Yusuf has been asking. Is there statistics? Salamafosa said that there are 3.1 migrants. Jacinta says there are 31 million migrants. I mean, our population is around about 62, 63, 65 million. We can't have all that kind of disinformation. So this kind of connection, both making claims about migrants in terms of the numbers, we're going to have to assess how that is done. So in other words, there is a way of migrant information systems that we're going to have to determine, and government is going to have to do this. Who is here? Who is legally here? Who has applied for asylum? Who is working? Who has overstayed? Who has been convicted of crimes and who has been deported? So, I mean, there are other positions that you can add in here. You cannot govern what you cannot measure. And this is something that's going to have to be done quickly. There's not something that you give to a commission and they sit for 2-3 years and nothing happens. MUSA should recognize South Africa's history and category, and I've already dealt with that project as far as that's concerned, that it's not just now this has happened. It's been ongoing for a long time. Then MUSA should propose a national migration compact. I think Ikbal has talked about it, but I want to articulate it. This should be a distinguished proposal for everybody. Bring together government, business, labor, civil society, faith communities, neighboring states particularly, and Africa as a whole, and international players. So the local communities and migrant organizations will have to get together in order to determine the value of the solutions that we are finding as a stress now. Its purpose would be established secure borders, lawful migration, as I said, human asylum, decent labor standards, effective deportation, regional cooperation, and community integration. Now, Ikbal has put into his document a moratorium needs careful framing. Now, you must remember, we can't advocate a blanket moratorium on migrant issues. It would be too broad and could conflict with legitimate asylum, family, labor, and other immigration rights. Instead, MUSA could suggest something like this and a discussion that could put across a temporary moratorium on how we deal with migration, and then especially how we are going to deal with new migration issues, where government must demonstrate to the capacity administrators that effectively accompanied by a rapid audit an existing migrant asylum system. And this, if the government does not do it, doesn't become defensible, then people will become more reactionary on the streets. You know, there is another call on the 30th of September, which is called by Jacinta's movement. From June to now, there's been a very hazard kind of situations. It's not been as focused as 30th June, and people cannot go on marching because that's going to create more unemployment because people don't know what to do. And the people marching, a lot of them are sort of unemployed and poor. So how do you relate to the fact that the broader context of this in our country, like 80% of the people are sitting at home working, they're getting things in their own lifestyle, getting on with their own lives, and they're not really understanding what we should be doing. So I'm suggesting what can be done. Then come the deepest principles of shared responsibility. This is where our transformative conscious movement becomes relevant. That means migration is not simply a migrant problem. It is a South African governance problem, regional problem, economic problem, as Yusuf has said. Where's our economic compact that brings up the economic value of our economy? So we need a political justice and a political economic justice. So we need a political economy that's ethically, foundationally based. So MUSA's 5 values can provide the framework. Now, this is the ethical view. We have to deal with sincerity, integrity, respect, accountability, compassion, merit, and excellence. So MUSA's position in one statement would be that MUSA believes that South Africa must move beyond false choices between open borders and xenophobia. A democratic state has both the right and responsibility to control its borders and regulate migration. But that authority must be exercised constitutionally, humanely, and without collective blame. South Africa must distinguish between legal migrants, as I said on those various points, and criminal offenders. Eliminate corruption. So we must understand that at the same time, migrants must never become scapegoats for the failures of South Africa's governments. Our approach must be one of moral, ethical responsibility of leaders, firstly dealing with service delivery, then dealing with the migrant view in parallel to the governance of our problems, governance of our issues that are confronting us. As I would say in a signature statement for MUSA, MUSA is not an anti-migrant movement. It's not about open borders. MUSA is for South Africa, in which migrants are humanely treated, borders are secure, refugees are protected, and exploitation, whether it comes from business, migrants, and South African citizens, is stopped. Communities must be heard wherever they are. We ask government and all leaders, faith-based, business, and political leadership and unions. They must stop turning a blind eye and giving a very linear view. Every person, citizen, or foreigners, I'm nearly done. This
Sorry,
is my view. I hope it's
stop you
clear.
there? I know we
Sure.
are. We obviously we are running very fast out of time, and I think this is something we find when we have a big panel. Is sometimes we do tend to run out of time because there's just so much ground to actually cover. And I just want to bring Ikbal in with the final thoughts because I think what is absolutely critical is for the government to actually act decisively, because this, at the end of the day, is going to impact on the country. The world is looking at South Africa, and the world is looking at how South Africa is going to react to this crisis. Ikbal, just final thoughts. We've got about 3 minutes. If you could unmute again, please, Ikbal.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Inayat. Yeah, without repeating whatever has been discussed and said, I agree with you fully that South Africa was becoming in the good eye of people when it launched the ICJ case. And the way it conducted its democracy in the early stages. I think people in government have failed us hopelessly. They've allowed the wheels to come off. South Africa really needs a reset based on the existing constitution. If you look at it, the constitution and the justice system is what's left to protect us. Otherwise, we're in trouble. And the next elections, I hope, will be about getting the right people who can do the job rightly. Because in the past, we've seen parties getting together for power, whatever their public statements were, but their agendas turned out differently. So, yes, we are not in the position, as we have discussed this, to defend illegal migration. The point was made. We're defending the principle that immigration law must be enforced by the state, not by mobs or individuals. We need to enforce the law intelligently, because an abrupt solution can create another economic and humanitarian crisis. The real test of South Africa's democracy is whether we can enforce our laws firmly while still treating every human being with dignity. Thank you, Inayat. I will leave my input.
Can I also suggest one thing to you? Is to gather
Please, quickly, Abu,
all.
I am running out of time.
Yes, can we please gather all the people concerned, government, including March and March, and so that everybody can sit down together. You know, recently every forum has and March and March and Jacinda has had a discussion in how they're going to work together. So why can't we all as a people together work towards solving this people? You know, the Quran says we have certainly honored the children of Adam. Why don't we all work together? This is my point of view of how we as South Africans can move forward. Thank you.
Point taken, Abu. It's something that we definitely will talk about as well. And I am aware of the FP Forum meeting with Jacinta as well. And that obviously has become another major talking point in the country in terms of where and why this discussion had actually taken place. But inshallah, we will leave that for another day. But for now, Ikbal, Yusuf, and Abu, we say Jazakallah to all of you for taking time out with us right here on Salam Media. All the best to all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa
Walaikum
alaikum
salam
salam
wa
wa rahmatullahi
rahmatullahi
wa
wa
barakatuh.
barakatuh.
And thank you again for having us on your show.
Yes, that brings us to the end of part one of tonight's discussion right here on Salam Media. Another important discussion, and this is the world is watching what is taking place in the United States of America. We're talking about the changing face of American politics. Abdul Al-Sayed, Zohran Mamdani, Ilhan Umar. And these are people that are featuring very, very prominently in the American political system. And big talking points at this point in time will be joined by Dr. Nadia Ahmed and Alhaj Mauri Salah Khan immediately after this break.